Start with the interior defensive line, the strongest unit collectively in the entire NFC East across the board with these four teams. I have the Giants first here on the interior defensive line with Leonard Williams, Ashawn Robinson, Dexter Lawrence, and Nacho. Dexter Lawrence right now might be the second best interior defensive lineman in football. I might take him over Jeffrey Simmons and Chris Jones. I think I would have to if he plays the way he played last year. I mean, you just think about how dominant he was on a week-to-week basis with no drop-off at all. The only game he wasn't dominant was against the Eagles and Jason Kelsey in those few games. But other than that, just a dominant week-after-week performance. Number two for me was interesting because there's so much talent you can go a lot of ways. I actually went with the Eagles here over Washington for number two, Nick. I just look at this unit and I think there's a lot more upside with the Eagles. And to be frank, Nick, now this is just upside and we're just talking ceiling for a second, but honestly, you can make the case the Eagles have the biggest ceiling on the interior defensive line over the Giants. Right now, they're not better, and so they shouldn't be ranked higher. But they have Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on this roster. A lot of people felt like in the last two classes, those might have been the best overall players in each class, regardless of position. They didn't go one or two. They both fell, one due to like weight issues and not playing a lot of snaps, and Jordan Davis, and he was injured his whole first year. So we really don't know what he's capable of, what he can be. And then Jalen Carter, who just like some off-field stuff that might end up being nothing now that he's on the Eagles. And so you have all that plus Fletcher Cox, plus Milton Williams, who is surprisingly a really good player. They got him in the third round. I thought it was a reach by them at the time, man. And nope, they found the right role for him. He's just a gap shooter, and he shoots really well in that system. And there's so many other bodies around that people have to account for that Milton Williams can shoot every time and pretty much get free a lot of the times. That's four players here. So to me, honestly, I think the Eagles are, now that I go over it, or could be close to be in the Giants range here for one. I'm still going to give the Giants one because it's more realized instead of like potential there with the Giants, and Dexter Lawrence is so good. But I did give the Eagles the slight edge over Washington, who is also an elite interior defensive line. Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, some other players behind them who I don't know. I haven't followed as well, so you might be able to offer a little bit more. Mathis has flashed a little bit, but either way, just having Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne as your 1-2 there is another elite group. And some might say right now they're better than the Eagles. I understand that. Just for me, I'm going to go with the upside there. And then finally, Dallas rounds out the group third, but they have added talent there too. Mozzie Smith, their first round pick, is a big dude who can move. Osa Adugazua, like his brother didn't work out for the Giants. He's a much better player than his brother, and he's got none of the off-field concerns either. So that's a decent unit as well there. So really just strong across the board in the NFC East on the interior defensive line.
I'd like to say the New York Giants are significantly above all these other teams. And in any other division, I may be able to say that, but you can't right now with Philadelphia and Washington. And I actually have Washington second. And I agree with you. I think Philadelphia could be won by the end of the season, by midseason, if Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis really come along. But that hasn't happened yet. But I still think it can. So I'm really scared of Philadelphia. And even though I have them third, I still have the utmost respect for them. And they still could be a top 5 unit in the entire league. That's just how crazy the NFC East is right now. But for me, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Rakeem Nunez-Roches, and Ashawn Robinson is a disgusting interior defensive line room. Those are 4 legit starters that you have, and you can rotate them. I think the New York Giants are in a very good position. I think Joe Schoen did an excellent job doing what he helped Brandon Beane do up in Buffalo, was add big bodies, good run defenders, physical, long players to the interior defensive line. Very excited about what the New York Giants can do. And then number 2, I just have a lot of respect for Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. And behind him, look, Fedarian Mathis, a high floor college tape when he was at Alabama. There's not a ton of depth behind those, but I still have them number 2 just because I have that much respect. And I've seen Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen terrorize the New York Giants for years now. Right behind them, Philadelphia, just insane. Everybody that they have, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Marlon Tuapolotu as well as back there. Like that's a very stout room. It's a very scary room. And I think Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis could really take the NFC East by storm if they really start to actualize the talent that we saw at Georgia. It's not a great situation for the Giants. And then Dallas, I have significantly behind these 3 teams. I like Mozzie Smith, but he's a rookie coming in, first round pick. I think he's going to be a good player. Osa, I felt like he's had a good first 2 years in the season since he was a third round pick. I think that was, in 2021. And then behind that, you have Neville Gallimore, Quentin Bohannon, Mr. Hankins, a bunch of players like that. So I'm not too thrilled about their interior defensive line room, but I also look at their defense. I see who their defensive coordinator is in Dan Quinn. I see Micah Parsons there, and I say it's going to work out. It's going to be fine. But relative to the rest of the division, I still think they're clearly 4th.
Let's move on to edge here, Nick. Give us your edge rankings.
Yeah, for me, edge, I considered Micah Parsons as an edge rusher here. So Clearly, Dallas Cowboys ended up being one. And I shouldn't even say clearly because Philadelphia is right behind them with guys like Brandon Graham. You have Josh Sweat. You have Derek Barnett. You have Hassan Reddick. You have just an insane edge room there. But just the fact that Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence are on the Dallas Cowboys led me to say Dallas is going to be number one, but I can easily be swayed to thinking it's Philadelphia. That's just how stacked both of those rooms are. Washington for me was third. Look, Chase Young is coming off of a serious injury, Dan. I don't know how effective he's going to be. We know the talent that he had at Ohio State. We saw it a little bit early. We saw how the Giants and Jason Garrett game planned against him. And people were like, oh, Andrew Thomas is shutting him out. It's like, yeah, kind of. But at the same time, the Giants are doing everything in their power to avoid Chase Young. Like, that's what that game plan was. We can go back and watch the tape. But Montez Sweat is a very good football player as well. And they still have him. So for Washington to come in third, it just also speaks to the talent of the edge position here at the NFC East. And behind them, James Smith-Williams, KJ Henry, who they drafted out of Clemson, Casey Toohill, F.A. Obata. So I don't really know much about Obata. James Smith-Williams, I feel like he was a solid little bit player they had. KJ Henry, a lot of people were buzzing about, but not a ton of depth behind those two top dogs. See what Chase Young can offer them. And then I have the Giants last. But I think the Giants, similar to what we were talking about with Philadelphia's interior defensive line, Dan, have a ton of potential. I think Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari, by mid-season, we could be like, yeah, they're definitely not last anymore. We just haven't seen it yet materialize on the football field at a consistent rate. So that's why I have the Giants last.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I have the same exact rankings as you again at Edge. So we're not finding too much differences right now in our rankings, Nick. So maybe not the best podcast fodder to not find differences in debates, but it's hard to see the division in a different way when you follow it this closely. And I would say Dallas is one for me because of Micah Parsons. That's the real reason here. And I would say the second best edge rusher in this division is Hassan Reddick. He's become one of the best in the NFL at winning up the arc with that unique edge bend that he has. So there's two elite pass rushers in the division as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of contenders behind them. So like you said, DeMarcus Lawrence still a strong player. The trio of Eagles you mentioned outside of Hassan Reddick are all really good players. Montez Sweat is a really good player. Chase Young, I guess, more of an unknown at this point because of the injury, but if he's healthy, he's going to be an impact player. And the Giants have a similar type situation with Azeez Ojulari as far as the health versus impact goes. And Kayvon Thibodeau, who at worst is a pretty damn good player. I think he's going to be borderline elite in his second year. So this is a much better division than I originally thought from a pass rushing standpoint. There's a really strong contingent of edge rushers and interior defensive linemen in this division. It's clear all these teams believe in the trenches. All these teams believe in rushing the passer and how important pass rush is. It makes it a lot more stressful to play quarterback in this division for sure. But right now, the Giants are going to be last on this list, but it's not a bad last. It's like a last on this list maybe out of these four teams, but they'd probably be more mid-pack against the NFL.